My brother announced that my house had been sold while I was still in uniform. He did it at my welcome home dinner. That was the part people later struggled to believe. They could understand the forged paperwork. They could understand the missing money. They could even understand, in that uneasy way people understand ugliness once proof makes denial expensive, that my own parents had helped him do it. But they always paused at the dinner. They would ask, he said it in front of everyone. Yes. In front of 26 relatives, 2 neighbors, 3 people from my father's church, and a long dining table covered with food my mother kept calling a celebration. I had been home from deployment for 9 days. I was still sleeping badly, still waking before dawn with the strange certainty that I had missed a radio call, still folding my clothes too tightly because months away from home can make ordinary closets feel temporary. My mother had insisted I wear my army dress uniform. "People want to honor you," she said. What she meant was that the uniform made the evening look meaningful. So I wore it. I walked into my parents' house at 6 o'clock with my hair pinned tight, my jacket pressed, and the old key to my townhouse still on the ring in my pocket. The key I had carried across 2 countries, 3 bases, and 11 months of distance, because sometimes a small metal object becomes proof that somewhere, something still belongs to you. My brother Caleb stood near the fireplace with a whiskey glass in one hand and a smile I did not trust. He had always smiled before taking something. My father waited until dinner was halfway over. That was his style. He liked an audience full, warm, and trapped by politeness. He tapped his fork against his water glass, stood at the head of the table, and said, "Before dessert, we need to clear up a misunderstanding." My mother looked at her plate. Caleb looked at me. I felt the room shift before the words came. My father said, "Myra, your brother and I have been trying to handle things responsibly while you were away." Responsibly. That word should have set off alarms. I set down my fork. My brother leaned back in his chair. "She's going to make this dramatic," he said, loud enough for the cousins at the far end to hear. I looked at him. "Make what dramatic?" He smiled wider. My father cleared his throat. The townhouse was becoming a burden. The room went quiet. Not silent, quiet. The kind of quiet where people keep breathing but stop pretending not to listen. I looked at my mother. She did not look back. My father continued. "You were deployed. Nobody knew when you'd settle down. The payments, the taxes, the repairs." "The payments were automatic," I said. My voice was calm. That surprised even me. Caleb laughed once. "There she goes, Captain Spreadsheet." A few people smiled, because they thought it was a joke and family teaches people to laugh before they know who is bleeding. My father's eyes hardened. "We sold it." The words were so plain, they seemed smaller than the damage they carried. My townhouse. The first property I had ever owned. The place I bought after 7 years of service and 4 years of saving. The place with the narrow kitchen, the cracked tile by the back door, the balcony where I grew basil in a chipped blue pot. The place I had left under the care of a neighbor, a bank auto-pay schedule, and a folder of documents locked in my bedroom desk. Sold. While I was deployed. My brother lifted his glass. "You weren't using it." My mother finally spoke. "We thought it made sense." The room moved around me in fragments. A cousin lowering her eyes. My aunt pressing 2 fingers to her lips. My father standing like a judge. Caleb's wife, Tessa, touching the diamond necklace I later learned had been bought the same week the sale closed. I reached into my pocket and touched the old key. Then I said, "Who signed?" My father's face changed. "Not much, just enough." Caleb put his glass down. "Don't start interrogating people at a family dinner." I looked at him. "Who signed the sale documents?" My mother whispered, "Myra, please." And that was when I understood the shape of it. Not the details, not yet, but the shape. Someone had signed my name. Someone had used my deployment, my absence, my trust, and probably the emergency contact forms I had left with my parents to make my home disappear on paper. I did not stand up. I did not shout. I did not reach across the table and take the smile off my brother's face, though I will admit the thought arrived fully formed. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap. Because 20 minutes earlier, before my father tapped his glass, I had received a text from Captain Leona Price at the Legal Assistance Office on base. Do not confront beyond what they say voluntarily. We have the notary file. I'm on my way. So I let them talk. My father mistook my silence for shock. My brother mistook it for weakness. My mother mistook it for one more chance to manage me. You have to understand, she said softly. Caleb needed capital. His business was drowning. You have your army career. You have housing wherever they send you. He has a family. A family. I looked at Tessa. She was pregnant with their second child and staring at the table as if the wood grain had suddenly become very complicated. I felt sorry for her for exactly 1 second. Then I remembered she had signed the housewarming invitations for the new property they bought 3 weeks after my townhouse disappeared from public listing records. My father added, "Your brother didn't steal anything. The money stayed in the family." That sentence did something to me. Not because it was the cruelest thing he could have said, but because it revealed the old rule in its purest form. When they needed me to sacrifice, I was family. When I needed them to answer, I was dramatic. When they took what was mine, the money had stayed in the family. I sat there in my uniform, with 26 people watching, and said nothing. My name is Myra Lawson. I was 35 years old that night, a captain in the United States Army, recently returned from an 11-month deployment with a transportation coordination unit that moved supplies, people, and equipment through places most of my relatives could not find on a map, but still felt qualified to call not real combat. I had spent my adult life becoming useful. That is not the same as becoming loved. Useful daughters learn early. They learn who gets forgiven and who gets assigned cleanup. They learn that a younger brother's emergency is everyone's problem, but their own boundaries are personality flaws. They learn to send money quietly, solve problems quickly, and apologize for sounding tired. Caleb was 3 years younger than me and had been almost successful since he was 22. Almost successful at construction management. Almost successful at flipping houses. Almost successful at a food truck that never passed inspection. Almost successful at a veteran-themed gym, despite never having served a day in anything except his own confidence. My parents treated every failure like weather, something unfortunate that happened to him. They treated my discipline like a natural resource. I bought the townhouse at 29 after saving through 2 assignments and 1 year of living so cheaply that my friends joked my furniture looked temporary. It was not big. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a narrow living room with morning light, but it was mine. The deed had my name only. Myra Celeste Lawson. No cosigner, no family loan, no gift from Dad, no silent contribution from Mom, mine. That mattered because I grew up in a house where ownership was always emotional before it was legal. My father believed that if he had given you life, advice, or an oil change at 16, then whatever you built after that existed partly under his authority. My mother believed peace was more important than accuracy. Caleb believed both of them. Before deployment, I prepared everything. Mortgage autopay, property tax escrow, insurance, HOA dues, utilities. A neighbor, Mrs. Bell, had a key for emergencies. I sent my parents a sealed folder with medical contact information, deployment contacts, and a limited power of attorney for one purpose only: vehicle registration renewal if the state required anything while I was gone. The document did not mention real estate. It did not authorize property sale. It did not allow debt, transfer, title action, or financial decisions. I remember telling my mother that. "This is limited," I said at her kitchen table. She waved one hand. "Myra, we're not lawyers." "That's why I'm explaining it." My father laughed. "You always act like we're trying to steal from you." I smiled because at the time that sounded unfair. 11 months later, I stood in the hallway outside the legal office on base, while Captain Price placed a copy of a warranty deed in front of me and said, "Your signature on this document is not just suspicious. It is impossible." I looked at the date. July 18. I was overseas on July 18. I had signed a convoy movement log that day. I had attended a briefing. I had sent a message to Mrs. Bell asking if the Basil had died. I had not stood in a title office in Pennsylvania selling my home to a buyer I had never met. The signature looked like mine the way a child's drawing looks like a house, shape without structure. The notary was a man named Paul Redding. The buyer was a holding company connected to Caleb's business partner. The sale price was low enough to move quickly and high enough to produce cash after the mortgage payoff. The proceeds had gone into an escrow account, then through a business account, then partly toward a down payment on Caleb and Tessa's new house. Captain Price turned another page. This is the power of attorney they used. I read it once, then again. It was not the document I had signed. The first page was mine. The second page had been replaced. The notary stamp was different. My initials appeared on the bottom corner, but they were wrong. I always crossed the top of my M slightly downward. Whoever copied it made the line too straight. A small thing. Small things save you when liars get lazy. Captain Price watched me carefully. "Do you want to call them?" "Yes." "I recommend you don't." "I know. Do you understand why?" I looked at the papers. "If I warn them, they start cleaning." "Exactly." So I did not call. We filed the report. Captain Price contacted the title insurer. The county recorder's office flagged the deed for review. The notary commission office opened an inquiry. A civilian real estate attorney agreed to meet the next morning. Mrs. Bell sent me doorbell footage from the week of the alleged closing, showing Caleb and my father entering my townhouse with boxes. Boxes. They had taken things too. Not everything. That would have looked like theft. They took the items families call stored when caught: my grandfather's field jacket, 2 framed photos, a small toolbox, the blue basil pot from the balcony. The pot hurt more than it should have. Maybe because it proved they had not just taken the house as a transaction. They had walked through rooms that knew me and selected pieces like my life was an estate sale I had not survived. By the time my mother invited me to the welcome home dinner, I already knew enough to destroy the evening. Captain Price advised patience. "Let them say what they believe their defense is," she said. "If they admit knowledge or intent, we document it." I said, "You want me to sit through dinner with them?" "I want you to do only what you can handle." I thought of the townhouse key on my ring. I can handle a dinner. That was only partly true. At my parents' table, Caleb gave me more than legal counsel could have asked for. He laughed about me being Captain Spreadsheet. He said I was never using the property. He said the money stayed in the family. He said, "You should be thanking us. The market could have turned. We protected your equity." Protected. My father added, "The paperwork was complicated, but your mother handled most of it." My mother's face tightened. Caleb shot him a look. There it was again, another piece. My mother looked at me with pleading eyes, not for forgiveness, but for silence. The family reflex. Please don't make this harder. Please don't embarrass us. Please absorb the damage quietly so we can call ourselves good people tomorrow. I lifted my glass of water and took one sip. Then the doorbell rang. My parents' house had an old brass chime that echoed through the foyer. Everyone heard it. My mother stood too quickly. "I'll get it." But Captain Price was already visible through the glass beside the front door. She wore her service uniform, her hair pinned cleanly, her face composed in a way that made panic look childish. Beside her stood a civilian man in a charcoal suit carrying a tablet and a blue folder. I recognized him from the call with the title company, Aaron Vale, senior claims investigator for the title insurer. Behind them stood Mrs. Bell, my neighbor, clutching her phone and looking like a woman who had been waiting 11 months to say something to somebody. My father muttered, "What is this?" I stood then. Not fast, not dramatically. Just enough to make the room understand that the dinner was over. My mother opened the door. Captain Price looked past her and found me. "Captain Lawson." "Captain Price." The room changed at the sound of my rank. That was always interesting to me. My family could ignore my career in private for years, but the minute another uniform addressed me properly, they remembered posture. Captain Price stepped inside. "I apologize for interrupting," she said. "We're here regarding the unauthorized sale of Captain Lawson's property and the fraudulent use of a power of attorney while she was deployed." No one moved. Mrs. Bell looked directly at Caleb. I saw my brother's face shift through 3 versions of denial before landing on anger. My father stood. "This is a family matter." Captain Price looked at him. "No, sir. It is a legal matter involving a service member's property rights, possible forgery, and a recorded deed." Aaron Vale opened the blue folder. "The title insurer has issued a formal hold on the current claim review," he said. "The deed transfer is under challenge. The county recorder has been notified of potential fraud. Any further sale, refinance, or transfer involving the property is now flagged pending investigation." Caleb pushed back his chair. "You can't just undo a sale." Aaron looked at him calmly. "That depends on whether the sale was valid." It was. Captain Price turned 1 page in her folder. Captain Lawson was not in the United States on the date her signature was notarized. My aunt made a sound under her breath. My mother sat down. My father said there was power of attorney. "A limited power of attorney for vehicle registration," Captain Price said. "Not real estate." Caleb pointed at me. She knew we were handling it. That was the moment I almost spoke. Mrs. Bell spoke first. No, she didn't. Every head turned to her. Mrs. Bell was 5 feet tall, retired from the public library, and impossible to intimidate if she had decided you were overdue. She held up her phone. "I sent her the footage. You and your father went into her house while she was gone. You carried boxes out. Don't stand there and tell that girl she knew." My father's face went red. "This does not concern you." Mrs. Bell smiled without warmth. "You made it concern me when you told the HOA I approved the moving truck." Tessa covered her mouth. Caleb said, "Shut up." Captain Price's voice cut through the room. "Mr. Lawson." Caleb stopped. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Authority is not volume. It is certainty backed by consequences. Aaron placed a document on the sideboard, angled away from the guests, but visible enough that my father could see the header. "This is the notary acknowledgement under review. This is the limited power of attorney provided by Captain Lawson before deployment. They do not match. We also have travel and service verification showing Captain Lawson was overseas when the deed was allegedly executed." My mother whispered, "Myra." I looked at her. Not angry, not yet. Anger would come later in private where it could not be used against me. "Yes." I didn't know it was different. Caleb turned on her. "Mom." My father said, "Denise, stop." Captain Price made a note. That tiny movement did more than any accusation. My mother realized it too. Her eyes filled. I could feel the room watching me, waiting for the daughter, the sister, the soldier, the supposed victim, to make the emotional sound that would let everyone decide how to feel. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. Who replaced the second page? No one answered. The silence this time was not hungry. It was afraid. Caleb looked at my father. My father looked at my mother. My mother looked at the table. Aaron said, "That will be part of the investigation." Captain Price turned to me. "Captain Lawson, do you want to make a statement here?" I thought of my townhouse, the basil pot, the key in my pocket, the way my mother had said Caleb needed capital as if my absence had made my ownership negotiable. I thought of every family dinner where my discipline had been treated as a community account, and every time I had been called rigid for protecting the things I earned. I looked at my brother. You sold my house while I was deployed. His jaw flexed. I looked at my father. You helped him. He swallowed. I looked at my mother. You let them use your hands and called it peace. She began crying then. I did not comfort her. Then I said, I'll make my statement through counsel. Captain Price nodded. Aaron explained the next steps. The title insurer would continue investigation. The county could mark the deed under fraud review. The buyer's holding company would be notified. Caleb's new house financing would be examined for proceeds connected to the disputed sale. Civil action was likely. Criminal referral was possible depending on findings from the Notary Commission and the forged document chain. Words like civil action and criminal referral entered my parents' dining room and sat down heavier than any guest. Caleb said, You ruin your brother over a townhouse. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because thieves love shrinking what they stole. A townhouse. A signature. A little paperwork. A family misunderstanding. I reached into my pocket and took out the key. I placed it on the table in front of him. This opened my door, I said, not yours. He stared at it. I picked it back up. Don't worry, I said, I keep records too. That was the only sentence I gave him. I left with Captain Price and Mrs. Bell. Aaron stayed behind long enough to give my father a card and tell him, with professional politeness, that any attempt to contact the buyer or alter records would be documented. Outside, the night air felt too cold for early September. Mrs. Bell hugged me hard enough to press the edges of my uniform jacket into my ribs. I'm sorry, she said. That nearly broke me. Not my mother crying, not Caleb yelling, not my father trying to sound wronged. A neighbor saying the thing my family had stepped around all night. I nodded because words were suddenly too expensive. Captain Price walked me to my car. You did well, she said. I don't feel like I did anything. You let the record form. I looked back at the house. Through the dining room window, I could see people standing in clusters now, not eating, not celebrating, not sure whether to leave or stay for the next piece of damage. Do you think I'll get it back? Captain Price was quiet for a second, which I appreciated more than comfort. I think we have a strong path to challenge the transfer. That's not the same thing. No, she said, it is. I nodded. Real justice rarely arrives in one clean piece. It arrives as a process, and process is slow enough to hurt. The next 4 months were not cinematic. There was no single court hearing where a judge slammed a gavel and handed me my keys. There were filings, statements, notarization records, title insurance reviews, bank traces, emails, interviews, and phone calls with people who used phrases like chain of title, while my chest felt like a locked room. The notary lost his commission first. Paul Redding admitted he had not witnessed my signature. He claimed Caleb told him I had already signed and was deployed, and that the family just needed help completing the packet. He said my father vouched for it. My father denied saying anything meaningful. Caleb denied everything until the title company produced emails from his business account attaching scanned pages. My mother eventually told the truth in a statement. Not all of it, enough. She admitted she had given Caleb access to the folder I left at the house. She admitted my father told her Myra would come around once the sale helped Caleb stabilize. She admitted she thought the second page of the power of attorney looked different, but did not ask because everyone was under stress. Stress. That magical word families use when greed needs a nicer coat. The holding company tried to claim innocent buyer status, but the connection to Caleb's business partner made innocence difficult to perform. The title insurer pressured settlement. The buyer unwound the transaction to avoid litigation. The proceeds traced to Caleb's down payment became a problem for his mortgage lender. His business line of credit froze. Tessa moved out with the children for 6 weeks. My townhouse came back to me legally in February. I stood inside it for the first time after the deed correction with Mrs. Bell beside me and Captain Price on speakerphone, because she had asked me to call when I got the keys. The place smelled stale. The walls had ghost marks where my photos had hung. The basil pot was gone. My toolbox was missing. The balcony door stuck because no one had opened it in months. But the morning light was still there. It came through the kitchen window and fell across the cracked tile by the back door exactly the way I remembered. I put my hand on the counter and cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough to let my body understand we had made it back. Mrs. Bell pretended to inspect the sink until I was done. Then she said, "I brought basil." She pulled a small pot from her tote bag. That one did break me. My family did not return to normal because normal had been the problem. Caleb blamed me for destroying his business. My father blamed me for involving the army. My mother blamed herself in private and me in public depending on who was listening. Tyler, my younger cousin who had been at the dinner, texted me once to say, "I didn't know they were serious." I told him seriousness was not the standard. Truth was. Thanksgiving came and went without me. Christmas too. My mother sent one message on New Year's Eve. "I hope someday you understand we were trying to help your brother." I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote back, "I understand exactly who you were trying to help." I blocked the thread after that. Some people think cutting contact is anger. Sometimes it is the first honest accounting a family has ever received. Caleb eventually entered a settlement agreement. He avoided prison, which disappointed some people who heard the story later and wanted a cleaner ending. But he lost the business, the new house, and the easy confidence that had carried him through 32 years of being rescued. My father had to take out a loan against his own property to help cover legal costs. My mother stopped using the phrase, family money. At least around me. I returned to duty. That surprised people. They expected collapse, a breakdown, extended leave, a long public wound. But service had taught me something my family never did. You can be hurt and still functional. You can be betrayed and still precise. You can lose something and still know how to stand up at 6 the next morning. I kept the old key. The locks were changed, of course. The key opened nothing anymore, but I kept it in the top drawer of my desk beside the corrected deed and the copy of the fraud review. Not because I wanted to remember the theft, because I wanted to remember the difference between possession and proof. They had possession for a while. I had proof. Proof took longer. Proof 1. If you have ever had someone in your family take something you earned and then tell you that your anger was the real problem, you know the kind of quiet this leaves behind. It is not empty. It is not peaceful at first. It is a quiet full of inventory. Who knew? Who looked away? Who benefited? Who apologized only after consequences arrived? Who still believed your loss was acceptable if it saved someone they loved more comfortably? Those questions do not make you bitter. They make you awake. A year after the dinner, I held a small cookout at the townhouse. Nothing fancy. Burgers, lemonade, folding chairs, Mrs. Bell's potato salad, 3 people from my unit, 2 neighbors, 1 cousin who had apologized properly and never asked me to make it easier for him. The basil on the balcony had grown wild. Near sunset, Captain Price stopped by in civilian clothes with a bottle of sparkling cider and a grin that made her look 10 years younger. "To corrected deeds," she said. I laughed. To corrected deeds. We sat outside while the sky turned orange over the row of townhouses, and for the first time since deployment, I felt like the place was not only legally mine, but emotionally returned. That was the real ending. Not the dinner. Not the confrontation. Not Caleb's face when Captain Price said fraudulent use of power of attorney. Not my father realizing the paper had teeth. Not even the deed correction. The real ending was ordinary. My own balcony. My own key, even if symbolic now. My own name on the record. People around me, who did not need theft explained as family love. The night my brother announced that my house had been sold, he thought absence meant permission. My father thought authority meant he could rename forgery as responsibility. My mother thought peace meant helping the loudest person avoid consequences. They were all wrong. A deployment is an absence from home. It is not an invitation to steal it. And when Captain Price opened that deed in my parents' dining room, she did more than prove a crime. She gave the room back its real name. Not family business. Fraud. Not misunderstanding. Forgery. Not support. Theft. I still serve. I still keep records. I still lock important documents in more than one place. I still answer to my rank when someone says it with respect. And sometimes, when people ask why I am so careful, I think of Caleb smiling over his whiskey glass and saying I was not using the house. Then I think of the corrected deed. My name. My signature. My home. And I remember that silence did not save me by itself. The record did. So I keep both now. Silence when the room wants performance. Records when the truth needs a witness.